Welcome to Deep in the Plus. I'm your host, Rob Whiteside. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We appreciate you. If you have not already, please subscribe to WDWNT TV for more great content. And please give this video a thumbs up as it helps people to find us. Tonight, we're talking with one of our favorites. It's Katy. How are you?
Great. How are you doing, Rob?
So excited. Thanks for coming on. Every time we talk about something having to do with old school or especially the Muppets, I always lean out to you and say, "Hey, can we talk about this a little bit?" And so this is the Muppets we're talking about, but this is not like the old school Muppets. This is the Jason Segal. I always call this the Jason Segal movie because I feel like he was the one that kind of had the most like behind making this movie happen. I think he wrote a lot. I think he's a big, huge fan. And to me, like, he was the reason this movie was kind of more modern and hip. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he plays a big component, and the energy he brings to this film is it. I don't think it would be to the level it is if he wasn't in it or contributed in making it. But I think this may be the newest film that we've ever reviewed together.
That's a good point. And I think you had talked briefly about the possibility of Pinocchio, and you said, no, let's not do that. I'll hurt it too much. Um,
But yeah,
so, I think you're right. I think this is probably the newest one. It was 2011. And you know what? I feel like the Muppets are kind of like Weird Al Yankovic. Like, he's always there, but it seems like every time he comes back, it's a comeback. Weird Al Yankovic, look it up, kids, if you don't know. But I think that with the Muppets, it's like they always seem to like have a reboot or a resurgence. With this movie in 2011, I felt like this was a real like clean slate for them, and the movie's sort of set up in that kind of like format where it's been a while since the Muppets have been popular. I mean, the thing about the Muppets, and I think maybe you and I have talked about this, is they're always getting beaten up on. It's always they're putting themselves down, they're making fun of themselves, other people are putting them down. And in this one it's like, hey, you guys are washed up, nobody wants you anymore, nobody likes you anymore. And so it's that kind of a vibe. And then they come back into this like it's so much like the Country Bear movie where it's like we're getting the band back together. And I feel like that's something that we've done a lot with the Muppets is the getting the band back together kind of a thing. So, I don't know. Do you feel like part of me feels like this is sort of like Force Awakens? It's like the same formula we've seen before, but with a bright new shiny coat of paint.
yeah. It there's like a few parts of this film that definitely are just like contingent on the Muppets constantly disappearing and then reappearing. 2011, this was a period in time where the Muppets were really trying to have like a relevancy as they had brought back the ABC show that was playing. That was a trip. Even in the parks, I feel like in around 2010, 2011, Muppets like the hype was back. There was merch out. Like they dropped the album for this film that we'll get into that like had so much hype around it. But I agree with you.
Yeah, and so they're just like the Muppets are always that ragtag group of people that or people puppets, I guess that they all will kind of form together. The original Muppet movie that you and I reviewed is very much like this, where they go on this journey and it all starts with Kermit, and then they pick up other people along the way, and then by the end they've got the gang together. It's very similar to that. That's why I said kind of like Force Awakens. If you look at Force Awakens and A New Hope, like they both kind of blow up a Death Star, and it's both picking up people along the way. And so I look at this one as sort of like that sort of rebirth sort of a thing more than I do any of the others, because there were a ton of other Muppet movies. If we go into Disney Plus and look at Muppets, there's a ton of Muppets. A lot of people, I think, overlook some of this stuff. I mean, on this show, you and I reviewed the Muppet movie. We reviewed Muppet Christmas Carol, Great Muppet Caper, and we've reviewed Muppets Haunted Mansion. But there's a lot of other stuff on here, like the original Muppet Show, and then the ABC one from 2015 that you mentioned, The Muppets, which that's confusing, right? This is called The Muppets, and that show is called The Muppets.
Yeah, that show, let's not talk about it.
Okay. No, the one I don't ever
That
want to talk
show.
about is that whole Muppets Now thing or whatever that they did for Disney Plus. That's the one that makes me sad. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, let's get back to talking about this one. So again, 2011, Jason Segal, Amy Adams, and they introduce a new character in this one, Walter. And so the movie is sort of at some point revolving around Walter and his brother Gary, who are, they're brothers and they grow up together in this little town. And then at some point, I think, I don't know if early on enough Walter realizes he's a Muppet. I don't know if that actually happens, but they do this whole montage to show that they're brothers. But as they're growing up, they don't ever explain that, do they? Like, why is one of them a Muppet? What happened there?
Yeah, there's no explanation on how Walter possibly could have become a puppet. Is somewhat confusing. Like randomly they're kids and then the next day he's like sitting in a chair next to Jason Segel. So I'd love to hear Walter's backstory.
That sounds like a Disney Plus show that we could do.
Yeah, doesn't
Walter's back.
it?
Um, yeah, it's like it's one of those things where I guess that's the joke is that as they're growing up, Walter and Gary grow up together, but Walter's a Muppet and Gary's a real boy, so they show that. I almost think it's cruel. They show them growing up and they use that like put your back against the wall and let me make the marks thing, and then Gary keeps growing and Jason Segel's actually pretty tall. Gary keeps growing and Walter is like at that same point. They show him kind of stretching to be taller, and he's basically telling his story in montage format about how he never felt like he fit in until he found the Muppets. And so then he was like, oh, there's just something about them that I was drawn to, and they show him having a Kermit the Frog birthday cake and getting. Dressing up like Kermit the Frog, and actually, to me, that hit a little too close to home to me because that was me with Star Wars bed sheets, dressing up like Luke Skywalker for Halloween. Like, so I don't know. Maybe I'm the Star Wars dork and he's the Muppets dork. I don't know.
I I think that's what's like the new Muppets for me at least, like it becomes this very very scared moment every single time you find out something is releasing because obviously direction has changed. None of Jim is gone. Brian's almost gone. We have the original voices almost all the way minted out. Like every time we're just like, what are we gonna get? And with this film, I think they directioned it in a perfect way, especially with Walter, because I don't remember the last time I've liked a new Muppet character, but Walter is just this Muppets mega fan that no fan can hate. How can you hate someone else who loves the Muppets? Like, he's not annoying. He's just like every fan watching the film. So I think that's what makes him so lovable.
And this is really them making a human Muppet for the first time. Like they introduced Pepe and Bobo, and thinking back to a bunch of them that they released for Muppets Tonight. Well, I guess Clifford from Muppets Tonight was also human. He was like this, your homie made of foamy. Um, I so I I love that they did this, and now he's part of that universe, and that's kind of cool. But I think he's underutilized, but we can talk about that later. So in this, they have this big montage where you find out about Walter and his love for the Muppets, and he and Gary, and that was their thing. And then now Gary's grown up, and for some reason he's grown up, but they're both still living in a kid's room. And now Gary has a girlfriend, and they're going to go into the big city. They're going to L.A. and Walter's kind of sad because he doesn't get to go, and he's like, surprise, you get to go. And then they start to show the relationship between Gary Jason Segel's character and Amy Adams' character, because they're saying, like they're showing how close he is with Walter, so much so that it's almost interfering with his relationship. And then in that scene where he's telling Walter, "Hey, I'm going to take you with me, and we're going to get to go to Muppet Studio," they start breaking out into song, which is this a musical, Katie? I mean, because I kind of feel like it is.
Yeah, it's 100% musical. I rewatched this for the first time last night, probably close to 10 years since I've seen this. I always remembered it having a good soundtrack, but there were just songs that kept coming. I was like, I totally forgot this was in here. This is like a almost like a Disney legacy song. How many times have you heard life is a what is it? Life's a happy
Life is a happy
song.
song.
Like,
Life's a happy song.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, so I mean, let's just talk about the music right now because are you a man or man or Muppet? That is to me the best song, and it feels like it had Jason Segal all. I mean, all over it. Like I feel like he was like, this is the thing we're doing because in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Jason Segal is obsessed with kind of doing a puppet show about Dracula. Like that's a thing that he
yes,
wants to do. So it's really funny that he was involved with this project. But Man or a Muppet is not only a great song, but just all the visuals of it are fantastic. And I guess we can. I mean, let's just go ahead and talk about that because it's got this appearance. There are a lot of cameos in this, which is a Muppet thing. But this is more cameos than I've ever seen in a Muppet movie ever before, and most of them are people who are um, playing themselves, especially during like the radiothon. But when or it's a telethon, sorry, radiothons in my head. So when they go to
right.
do Man or a Muppet, the cameo is that you've got Jason Segel as a person, and then there's a puppet version of him, and then you've got Walter and his human form, which is Jim Parsons from Big Bang Theory. So good. That is such a catchy song.
Yeah, Man or Muppet is just like you said, totally Jason Segel written all over it. I could see it like popping up in an episode of How I Met Your Mother. He is just like he totally puts himself into this song, and it's so like almost noir feeling. Great, great song. I think it's most probably the most memorable moment from this film. But I'm pretty sure they won an Oscar for the song Man or Muppet.
Okay.
Trying to
Yeah.
think.
This one I can. I mean, I'm still walking around like I just rewatched it like you did. I'm still walking around the place singing. Am I a Muppet? Um, just like so good. I feel like that energy kind of got lost, and we could talk about that later into the sequel. I assume is the sequel, The Muppets Most Wanted, because I feel like that all kind of fell apart from there. This one had a lot of charm and heart that I don't think the second one of this series did, but it's also a fairly long movie for a Muppet movie. It's almost 2 hours.
Yeah, I agree with you. We can talk about Muppets Most Wanted, but I'm I'm on the same boat.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so when they finally get together, they do this "Life's a Happy Song" thing. They go to and I'm actually really blanking. What is the Amy Adams character's name?
Mary.
Mary. So they go to Mary's classroom, and she's a teacher, but she just happens to be sort of like a auto mechanic teacher, which is hilarious. The way they put it together, it's not hilarious that she is an auto mechanic teacher. It's hilarious the way they put it together because they make it seem like she's going to be like teaching algebra, and then they switch over, and there's this huge truck in her classroom. So they establish early on, which is kind of smart, that Amy can or that Mary can fix anything. And so in that time period, though, all the kids in the classroom are dressed very like old school, and I feel like I'm kind of lost at that point as to what the time period is. I mean, does that make sense? Like a lot of the stuff that they do, and maybe it's because they're from a very small town, but a lot of the things that they do seem like it's almost the 50s or the 60s.
Yeah, it seems very like Meet Me in St. Louis, like middle of Illinois, nowhere. As someone from the Midwest, I can make fun of these towns. It's just like how it goes. Everyone's the same. I don't know if they all break out in musical numbers, but that seems like I said, very like small town musical, Broadway-ish, like the costuming, and it kind of like they've kind of bring it when they move over to Los Angeles, but in the beginning of the film, there's definitely a direct costume
Yeah,
direction at
but
least.
They're wearing like saddle shoes here, and like the cardigans, and the kids have the shirts buttoned up to to the necks, and it looks. I mean, again, it looks very 1950s, 1960s. Like even if it's a small town, I still assume people, kids are wearing shorts and t-shirts to school, but um, and that's part of the joke. I assume is that this is a small, simple town that they come from.
Yeah.
Here's again a quick picture of like the which this old car, which is that the car from the Muppet movie, or am I making that up?
It, no, it does look like the Electric Mayhem ends up printing over in the Muppet movie.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm not sure. I never actually noticed that. The station
Uh,
wagon.
yeah, it's kind of cool. So at that point, they have an exchange where you can tell that Mary's not super excited about Walter coming along on this trip, but she knows how much Gary loves Walter and that how much Walter wants to see the Muppet Studios. So they decide to add the Muppet Studios to this big, huge LA tour that they're gonna go take. Um, and so you know, as they go to put together their list. I'm looking at the list that she makes up. It says she wants to go to the Magic Castle. She wants to do a murder mystery. She wants to go to Grauman's Chinese Theater. Um, so it's Mary and Gary's Los Angeles adventure, and Madame Tussauds, Guinness Book of World Records, Hollywood Bowl. I mean, you get to go to these places all the time.
I do get to go. That sounds like a very out of towner list, may I say. But
No,
but
no, no. Be that person.
um, as someone who I've only lived in California, this is like my third year anniversary this summer. But watching it now as someone who's like from a small Midwestern town who had dreamed of Hollywood and moved out here, like it's fun to see. Like they got Pink's hot dogs in the car, and when they were standing up against the Muppet Studio, you could see all the background, and it was just like, oh, it's crazy. I just get to walk around there all the time. But
Yeah. I've been to where the Muppet Studios is. It's so funny. It's just kind of tucked out. You hardly even notice it. It's kind of tucked over to the side. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, again, I'm looking at this Santa Monica Pier. Yeah, you're right. The In-N-Out Burger. It's definitely that kind
yeah,
of a list. Um,
you can tell it was made by some lovers of LA.
or somebody that said, "Hey, when tourists come here, where are all the crummy places they decide they want to go?" Madame Tussauds, yeah, let's put that on the list. Which, by the way, I love that we have a Madame Tussauds in Nashville, and it's all music, and it's a neat place. So I'm not disparaging
Cool.
that at all, but it's just funny that you know this list. Anyway, so they decide to go. They're going on this trip. They're going by bus, and then they go to L.A. And then because of Walter, they've added the Muppet Studio tour onto their list. They go to the studio, and it's all run down. And again, that's kind of this whole like the Muppets have been forgotten, and it's been a long time. And so they go to take this tour, and Alan Arkin is the one that's giving the tour, and Alan Arkin, of course, from Rocketeer fame.
Oh, yeah,
PV.
I had not realized that until yesterday, probably because the last time I watched this, I was very young, but I made the connection.
Yep. So when he's given the tour, and I feel like that's one of the biggest first cameos. Actually the first one that I remember seeing in this movie is Mickey Rooney, who is now passed. Um,
Yeah.
it was neat that he was in there because definitely a Disney legend. Um, and then they go through this tour, the studio tour, and when they're going through it, they go in and they see like here's Kermit's office, but you can't go in there, and let's show you where all like the wire is kept and the rope. And so like Walter's kind of bummed by this tour, and he sneaks in to Kermit's office, and then just then Statler and Waldorf come in with the bad guy, Mr. Richman. See, it's funny because he's
Texas
a rich
Richman.
man. Rich men are evil apparently. And so he comes in and basically tells them that he's going to, even though he's telling people he's going to make a Muppet museum here, he's going to demolish the whole thing and drill for oil because he can smell oil, but also because there was that whole, test that we did that we found oil. Again, a lot of that kind of humor, that sort of misdirected humor, is in here. There's a lot of breaking the fourth wall humor in here. Like, hey, I think Jason Segal was like, yeah, I'm still worn out from that musical number we just did.
There, I will say, I do think find the scene when they're checking out the studio. There was one part where they're like, it's Mary, Gary, and Walter with a group of tourists, and the tourist is like, "Is this Universal Studios?" And he's like, "Oh yeah," and they just keep going.
Yeah.
So they have great one-liners like that, but I will say I think they almost break the fourth wall too much. Like it's a Muppet thing to do. Like it's a very Muppet-esque to break the fourth wall, but they're doing it almost every 5 minutes. Like they're sitting on Kermit's couch and Amy's like, "Oh, this is gonna be a short movie." And it's like, why even add that? Like it's almost unnecessary, but
Well, I mean, they do it too much in She-Hulk, but that's something that we'll sometime talk about if we talk about She-Hulk or on this show. So, um, I, I don't it does. I mean, that's the whole idea of breaking the fourth wall is it takes you out of it for a second, and you're like, oh, you guys are in on the gag too, and so yeah, it should be used very sparingly. But I don't know. I think it sometimes works for them when they do that. But you're right. I think they did use it a little bit too much. Here's Alan Arkin giving the tour to these folks, and you can see that the woman has, I think, she's got a Hollywood guide in her hand, which I don't know why you would have a Hollywood guide in your hand walking through a studio tour, but it is what it is. So the whole thing's dilapidated. Walter overhears this evil plan, and then he's in shock. That part was very funny to me. The part where he just screams from scene to scene to scene, and he's still screaming. That was some solid humor.
yeah, no, hilarious. And I love the way that Jason Segel just like reacts to Walter. I think Jason does a great job of just like getting on an emotional level with obviously an inanimate puppet. But in that scene, he's like petting him on the bus, like trying to calm him down. It's just he's treating him like a person. So I agree. That's a good scene.
Then they decide when Walter finally calms down, they decide they need to do something with it, and they decide that they're going to find Kermit the Frog to tell him what's going on. I feel like in modern day, a lot of this movie doesn't quite hold up the same way in the fact that you could reach out on the internet, you could I don't know, call him.
There's the one, so obviously they end up making it into Kermit's estate because Kermit comes up on them trying to jump over his electric fence that he has. But I almost didn't like this that Kermit mansion. Like I love the fact that Kermit has a cozy home and like it's very well decorated inside and he has all these Muppet portraits up that later in the musical number, but I don't think it's fair that Fozzie's out in an alley and Kermit's living it up in a mansion in the hills. Like I don't imagine that's what Kermit would be doing. As like a Muppet fan, I would hope he just lives in a small cottage somewhere. But the mansion was always a little off to me.
Yeah, and in this mansion, although I will say that when we meet up with Piggy, she says that she bought the mansion and that he's been the one staying there taking care of it. So I mean, that does feel very Kermit. Is that he's continuing to be responsible for something that they did together. But that she was the one that was extravagant about buying the thing in the first place. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't quite make sense, especially because we know that in real life, not in real life, in real time, there have been other Muppet projects in between where they've all been together. So the fact that it would have been so long since they were separated, but that little thing about them trying to find Kermit and just driving for hours and hours, and they see a map of the stars, homes. And that's a misdirect comedy bit because it's really Pink's hot dogs that they see, and not the map of the stars homes that's in the foreground, but they see the hot dogs in the background. When that happens and they finally drive around and they get to Kermit's house, you would think again with this huge gate that has Kermit and Piggy on the front they would have been a lot easier to find than having to waste their entire day driving around Hollywood and trying to find this house. But once they do, they get to Kermit. Kermit has a butler who is an 80s robot, which is hilarious. And then once they have that conversation with Kermit and they convince him to put the band back together, he's like, well, we're gonna have to find some people, which again is very much like the Country Bear movie. They go through and they go and try to find everybody, and we meet them in their new environments and see what they've been up to. But in this one, they go and they find Fozzie first. And the reason he has to put the band back together, I think I overlooked this part, is that they need to raise $10 million, which if this movie had been the original movie, it would have probably been $1 million. But because of inflation, now they need to raise $10 million. And it's because of some weird thing that was in the contract that the big rich Hollywood contract that they're referencing from the first movie that Kermit signs, and it says that if they don't get $10 million by midnight, then they lose the Muppet Studio, and they find out later they lose the rights to the Muppet name. So they need to find $10 million so that they can save the studio and save the Muppets. And when they get together to talk about that, they're like, well, the best way to do that is a show. We got to put on a show, so let's go get the gang back together. But again, this is 2011. Pick up a phone, hit up social media. Like, you don't really necessarily need to do the adventure. So I feel like that's a little bit of a flaw in a movie, like an original road movie, that makes sense. But in a 2011 road movie, I guess there's a suspension of disbelief.
I mean, I agree with you. Just looking back at the original Muppet movie, this section of the film is almost hard to watch because you compare it to like Kermit finding Fozzie at the El Sleazo in the original one, and now he's like with the Muppets on some stage, and it's just like everything's downplayed almost. So it's like, I don't know, it's just sad. Like, you don't want to see Fozzie doing something like that. Like, that's my take at least, and I feel like there could have been a better outcome of all the Muppets coming together rather than Kermit once again going to hunt them each down.
Yeah, no, I agree. But when they go on this road trip to find everybody, the first one he finds obviously is Fozzie, and then they go and find Gonzo, and Gonzo owns his own toilet or bathroom company called Gonzo's Royal Flush, which of course they've immortalized at Disney Hollywood Studios now, which I think is fantastic. That there's some kind of a tie-in. I feel like that's the only tie-in to this movie you would find at Hollywood Studios, other than maybe some reference in the Muppets queue. But when they do that and they go find Gonzo, he's in a suit and he's like rich, like fancy businessman. At this point, I'm like, why didn't Gonzo just give them the $10 million?
Oh, yeah. You think he had it from the Flush Factory?
No, I mean, he's like
I don't.
Mr. Like, it's a fancy business, and he's like in a suit, and he's got like 8 people that work for him just in that one scene. No?
Maybe Gonzo was like, why would we save the theater? We haven't used it in 20 years. This seems like a ridiculous task.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like something like that would happen, but I mean, obviously that means that the movie doesn't, the movie doesn't move forward if that doesn't happen. But he seems to be a very important, very like, you can't tell me this business isn't worth $10 million. And instead of just selling off the business or whatever, he blows it up. So maybe that's
Yeah.
the way they cover that up, is he just blows it up because he's Gonzo and that's the kind of thing he does, and now there's no there's no trace of a way to get the money back unless he could get the insurance money. I don't know. I'm just I just
Well,
looked at
I
that and
feel
was like,
like
why didn't they do that?
I feel like Gonzo doesn't have insurance.
Fair. That's a fair point. Um, but again, the Gonzo's Royal Flush sign that they have on the outside is the same. There's a recreation of this over the bathrooms in Hollywood Studios, and I love every bit of that. So then they go and he's got a button that is the automatic destroy plumbing business button. And so he goes ahead and pushes the button because, of course, Gonzo would have this button. blows up the whole thing, and then they make another fourth wall scene about like or joke about how big that explosion was or whatever from a budget standpoint. Um,
Yeah.
so then they go pick up the rest of them. They go to pick up Animal, which I think is interesting because each of these are like a one-off. Like there's a vignette, there's a story behind it. They go to pick up Animal, and he's at a like kind of a sanctuary for anger management, which is of course hilarious. Um, and so when they go to do that, there's a whole scene for just Animal. But then the rest of them, there's a montage. And they kind of, again, fourth wall, talk about like we're going to do that in a montage. And they go and get the Electric Mayhem Band is in a subway playing music. And then Beaker and Dr. Bunsen Honeydew are in like a big, huge lab, as you would imagine. Sam the Eagle is doing some sort of like a Fox News show. And then Scooter's at Google, which again, all of that tracks. It's very funny that the jobs they give them. Sweetums is at the car lot still, so it's like it's happening again. And then Ralph's not in the montage, which again is a very fourth wall joke. It's like, hey, well, what about me? Why wasn't I in the montage? And they're like, oh, well, here's your story. And he's like, do you want to? They were like, do you want to get in on the group? And he's like, yep. He's like, yeah, that was funny. Um,
They're
so
always doing Ralph dirty.
they're always what?
They're always doing Ralph dirty.
Yeah.
There's that
Uh,
scene in I think it's Muppets Take Manhattan. It may be Caper, but when Ralph's in the dog, like the adoption center, I would have loved to see that again or something and have all the dog puppets. I think that's like one of the most memorable Ralph scenes. So
well, now they've got the band back together, so to speak, and everybody's on their way, and they're like, okay, we're done, we did it, and it's like, oh, nope, you got to get Piggy, and that's again sort of it feels very formulamatic is that they would come back to like Piggy's the last one. They don't get Piggy first, and then Piggy's with them the whole time. She's the holdout. She's the last one. They need to go to France, and he's like, they're like Walter's like, well, let's drive there, and Jason Segal's like, oh, we can't drive there because it's too far. Not that you have to go through water, but that it's too far. And then or I think Mary suggests like, well, we could use a map to use the map to drive. So they show up in France. They see her. Now again, when they meet Piggy, she seems to be very successful. Uh, she's got her own office and her own secretary. Again, I go back to the whole: could she have kicked in a little bit of money to help raise this, like save the studio? Uh,
oh yeah,
I mean, so
her
between
and
her and
Kermit could have
Gonzo,
sold.
yeah, could
Yeah,
have sold their
no,
house.
Piggy. Yeah, they should have sold that mansion. I don't know, like obviously she's set in France. Like I don't think Kermit needed to be living in this like multi-bedroom estate. That's definitely $10 million in LA. I don't know what that like.
Um, and I feel like in the Great Muppet Caper, she was also in fashion. Like she was trying to break into fashion. So I guess that's what
That,
Piggy does. Is she's always in fashion. In this one, she's like a plus size editor for a magazine. Um, and then they cut to her and she's in her office trying to figure out which donut to eat, which again seems very Piggy like. I love the bit. I hate that I love it, but I love the bit with Muppet Man. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's
It's-
really dumb, lowbrow humor, but the idea is that they decide that they're going to try to find their way into the office by doing Muppet Man. It's like, okay, let's do Muppet Man, and Muppet Man is this overly over the top scheme where they all the Muppets get in one suit and they walk into the office, and then she doesn't recognize Fozzie because he's got a mustache and a beret, and then when it all falls apart, she's like, "Oh, I can't believe I fell for Muppet Man." I don't know. I don't know why I
yeah.
like this. I have no idea.
I I don't know why. Don't hate me for this. Miss Pig. I used to love Miss Piggy. If you watch the original Muppet Show, Piggy brings an element of just chaos in a different way than like say Animal or something. She's just like emotionally chaotic. In these films, I swear they just want to make her annoying. They just want her to be like some annoying thing in Kermit's ear. But I feel like giving her this like sense of like stability, and she can do it without them was nice. Um, but yeah, Muppet Man's funny. I don't have a problem with that scene.
Um, then there's this weird scene, and I don't know if this one struck you as odd or not, but Piggy's apprehensive, and it's not really clear. Did they get married and then divorced, and or are they still married or what? Because they talk about the whole, um, she left and he stayed behind to take care of the mansion, and it's super serious. So much so that Kermit's wearing his serious clothes. Like, I don't know where he got these clothes because he wears no clothes the rest of the movie. But he's got this very serious. It's almost like a French film at this point. This scene, there's not a lot of comedy to it. It's really kind of it's a very dramatic scene. I feel like.
He's in his blue era for sure. This following Muppet canon,
Right.
technically,
Okay. All right. You're making a good
technically
point.
they're married. Technically, they've been together for years. This was a rekindling. I don't believe Kermit and Piggy went this long without seeing each other. I don't think Miss Piggy would in any world agree to that. But it is humorous seeing them get on that level with each other. And obviously, this is a couple that people have been seeing on television and in film since the 70s. So everyone wants the update on this situation.
They're the Ross and Rachel of their generation.
Yeah, I guess.
Uh, you're like, I don't know who that is. So
I know friends.
when then they come back to LA and decide that they're going to try to get their show going without Piggy because she's not going to come back, and they go through a series of executives trying to get this show going, and they finally get to one of these. They finally get to Rashida Jones, who I love. I think she's great. And when they get to her, she shows them this like focus group of what's important and what's popular, and then she rolls out this thing that just happens to have the Muppets way, way, way out on the side of this who's relevant map. So they're like, okay, she's like, you're not relevant, you don't get a show. And then Donald Glover walks in and says, hey, one of our best shows, Punch Teacher, I think is the name of the show, uh, hosted by Ken Jeong. There was like a bunch of like little cameos like this with Ken Jeong and Donald Glover walking in, and all of those together. That he's like, well, we've got this 120-minute time slot now that we can't fill, and then she's like, all right, I'll give you guys the show, and all you got to do is get a celebrity host, and you're good. So then it starts this whole thing about they go to the theater, and the theater is actually for some reason the El Capitan. Like, why?
Yeah, I wondered that. There's a scene where they're standing in front and it's like the Muppet Theater. And it's like, wouldn't the Muppet Theater just be at the Muppet Studio? Like, I'm confused on why it has to be on Hollywood Boulevard, but I just random, like, definitely random.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so the thing that clued me in is seeing Jimmy Kimmel's studio right next door, because it's right next door to the El Capitan. Like, that's why they always send the audience that are like, hey, here are the Avengers talking about the new movie, and they're next door doing the world premiere, and guess what, everyone in here gets to go see the movie, yay. And I've been there. There's like the Ghirardelli, like the soda shop and the gift shop, and so they put this whole thing that it makes it look like that on one of the biggest tourist spots in all the world, there's going to be this dilapidated Muppet Theater right next to it.
Yeah, it's just hard to believe they haven't seen each other since Muppets from Space in 1999. And now they have a theater on Hollywood Boulevard that has been empty for 10 years. I don't think that would last, but
And I guess we're getting too granular here because I assume that that there's a sign that says studio tours and it points to the back. So I think that we're supposed to make the connection that the studio and the theater are connected somehow, whereas they're not even close in real life. I mean, it's like what 5-10 blocks away is where the studio is, the Muppet Studio. But
Yeah.
it looks like the El Capitan, the way that the marquee is set up. So it's like it's definitely for anybody who has been there before, that that's what it is. Not only because of location, but because of the way the marquee looks. And then it says studio tours, and it's got an arrow pointing around, which I guess would make it seem like it's next door or behind it. And again, way too
I
granular at this
see.
point, but I feel like I don't know. I feel like I wanted a better connection. It doesn't seem necessary that the theater would be here on Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah, I mean, just as someone watching the film, if you're familiar or you've visited Los Angeles, you'll know that's on the main strip. But yeah, I didn't even catch that it said studios are on the back because I'm sure the average person watching this wouldn't, but the average person may also not know that's the El Capitan. So
Um, then the studio's been condemned. They go in to fix it up, and I love that Beauregard's still there from the old days. Like
Beauregard is
that
always a
would
good
be
face.
that would be very Beauregard of him to have just been there. He's like, "Where have you guys been?" Um, so the studio inside, I love that it kind of looks like the Muppet Show studio. The multi levels where the dressing rooms are. That it's meant to look like the original Muppet Studios, which I feel like we're in London, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they were all filmed in London. I
Yeah.
don't. I mean, I would have just used MGM or Hollywood Studios, like, but
Yeah. But I mean, it's kind of funny. But then, because they've got like three different storylines going on at this point. They've got like the Muppets are cleaning up the theater, getting ready for the big show. You've got Kermit's trying to find his celebrity host, and he's going through, and it's like Molly Ringwald and all these things that all these people that would have been a big deal back in the day, and none of them will do his show. And then um, and then you've got the storyline with Gary and Mary because Mary is now realizing that this has become the most important thing in Gary's life because it's the most important thing in Walter's life, and now this trip that they were supposed to have taken together that's supposed to have all this cool sightseeing, and it's their 10-year anniversary and all of this stuff that they were going to do. And Gary says, "Well, you remember the whole reason we came was for the Muppet Studio," and she's like, "No, that wasn't why we came. We came to be together." And he doesn't get it, and then he has a very reflective song in "Am I a Man or Am I a Muppet?"
yeah. Um, I think like I Mary has the one song, Party of One, the Amy Adams solo. I think is mentionable. Kind of fun. Piggy's in it for a little bit, but yeah, Man or Muppet blows it out of the water.
Um, yeah, no, that song that is a good song. But at the same time, it's weird to me because there really hasn't been a lot of specific stuff about Mary, and that's all of a sudden now we have a moment of Mary, which is good. It's good that we have that, but it seems a little like forced in to me.
Yeah, I mean, everyone wants to see a solo from Amy Adams. Um, but yeah, not the best in the film.
And the funny part to me is this is exactly halfway through the movie at this point. Like I said, it's one of the longer Muppet movies. It's like an hour and 50 minutes. And this is halfway in between when they're in the studio getting ready to do their show. So most of the second half of the movie is the show itself. Like the things that they do, what's happening behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff, them trying to raise money, et cetera, et cetera. So
It is a long one.
it's actually an hour 40 minutes, and then for some reason there's like 10 minutes of credits
Credits.
afterwards. So,
Yeah.
but again, a lot of cameos in this one. I made a list. I don't know who your favorite cameos were in this one, but obviously you have the people who starred in it, like Chris Cooper and Jason Segal and Amy Adams. But you've got Alan Arkin Mickey Rooney, Dave Grohl. I mean, Dave Grohl
Dave
in
Grohl.
the was so good as the drummer in the Muppets. Emily Blunt and John Krasinski are both in this one. Uh, Judd
Okay,
Hirsch was in it, and Judd Hirsch was in it for so little. Like, I don't know, they wasted Judd Hirsch. There must have been something in the cutting room floor about Judd Hirsch because they do this big telethon and they have all these celebrities answering phones, and John Krasinski, Neil Patrick Harris, Judd Hirsch, Rico Rodriguez, Selena Gomez, Whoopi Goldberg. They're all on this panel answering phones. Judd Hirsch is the only one I feel like they never interact with. He's like off in the
yeah,
corner. Um,
yeah. My favorite out of the guests, I mean, Jim Parsons, I think was like the biggest on screen. Like Jim Parsons made complete sense to be the human version of Walter. Like they nailed that. And he just a fun face to see in a Muppet movie, but Mickey Rooney, obviously, just starting off the film, I think probably my fave because he's been in Muppets before. So cool to
yeah.
see him.
James Carville was in there
Yeah,
for again some unknown reason. Um, but so let me just show like this picture because he Carville is right here. The flowery shirt to his right or left here. That's Judd Hirsch. Like, I mean, I feel like Judd Hirsch is kind of a big deal. And ironic, Judd Hirsch played Leonard's father in Big Bang Theory when Jim Parsons was in that. You're
uh,
welcome.
it's all connected.
It's all connected. This is all connected. I do love the cameos though. I was trying to see if there's any. The Neil Patrick Harris one. The whole the whole thing is like I don't know why I'm not hosting this. Because he hosted a bunch of stuff. Zach Galifianakis is in it. Sarah Silverman in the bar or the restaurant with Amy Adams, and then Kim Jong and Donald Glover I mentioned before. So Kristen
Jack
Shaw and
Jack
Jack
Black.
Black. Yeah.
Yeah, he was
So
pretty funny.
yeah, and it was funny because they almost did him as like a one-off early on, and then he ended up being integral to the storyline because they kidnap him to be the host of the show. So they're trying to raise $10 million. They do their show, and it's you know there. I want to talk about the ending in a second, but I want to throw a couple trivia questions at you first. You mind me doing that real quick?
I will try my best.
No, you'll do great, I'm sure. You ready? These are just little things that I
Yeah.
noticed while I was watching it, and I wondered like if you were paying attention to it. Um, and I don't know how granular to go in this, so I'll start bigger, and then we'll get smaller if that makes sense. So, what is the name of the town that Gary and Walter are from?
Smallville,
S-
right?
clo- Small
Small
town.
town.
Yeah,
Small
Smallville is where
town.
Superman's from.
Right.
When Walter first discovers the Muppet Show, the two of them are sitting there watching it, and they in that opening montage, and they talk about it, and it's like you hear Kermit say, "It's the Muppet Show with our very special guest star." Who is the first one?
Steve Martin.
You nailed it. And there's a poster for the same Steve Martin thing later in the thing, so I don't know if maybe they tried to get Steve Martin and they couldn't, and they just wanted to give him some props or whatever. But yeah, Steve Martin, man, good.
Yeah.
Um, they show a prom picture in the beginning with Gary and Mary, and then Walter and his date. What color dress is Mary wearing in that prom picture?
Like red,
No, blue. The
blue.
Walter's prom date is wearing red. I know that was so random. I'm so sorry about that. There's
It's
this funny scene where they are at the mansion waiting to figure out if they can get in, and they hear music and they turn around. And they hear like this choir music, and they see a silhouette of Kermit, and then you see that the silhouette was because of the lights on a bus that was filled with a choir, which is again very funny. What was the name on the choir bus?
it was like, oh my gosh, something like church choir. It was like evangelical church choir or
Good
something
Shep
along those
Good
lines.
Shepherd Good Shepherd church choir. So
Good
uh,
Shepherd.
Good Shepherd. Yeah, I know, kind of crazy. 80s robot has carrying a tray. What's on his tray?
It was New Coke and it was Tab.
Jeez. See, you said you didn't. Ah, you nailed it. Um, the rehabilitation anger management place where Jack Black and Animal are. What's the name of that?
Ooh, I do not know.
Fresh Pathways.
Fresh
They've got
pathways. That's
they've
good.
got little they've got robes and it's got it stitched on the robes that they're wearing. This is the last one I have for you, and you kind of nailed them all, but I don't know if you would get this or not. 80s robot has a digital number on him for some strange reason. What is that number?
Ooh, I did not catch his number.
Well,
What
and
is
again,
it?
I don't doubt it, and I'm not sure it had any significance whatsoever, but it's 28. Like again, I don't
Um,
I always assume that everything in everything is there for a reason. So
I,
that's why I was.
I'm not sure what 28 would be.
I mean, it could
I don't
be
know.
Mickey Mouse 1928. I mean, would it be that? Would they be that on the nose about something like that?
I don't know. I would believe it would be related back to Henson before Disney, but who knows? I
Yeah. Well, again, you nailed it. Thank you for playing along, man. You picked up a lot of those
Thanks.
that I did not think you would get. Um, so you win.
The Steve Martin is one of my favorite episodes, so of course I'll always recognize that one, but thanks for the game.
Here's the number. You can see it right there, and it doesn't change throughout the movie. It's all because he is the driver in the movie as well. So you can see the number 28 listed there for some strange reason.
He is so
So
cute though. He's like the communical robot.
yeah, no, he is. Um, so the way this whole thing ends, they are supposed to raise $10 million. They get so close, they're within like inches. Which again, if Piggy's got any money, she could have just thrown it in. Then it, everything stops and it stops too short, and they're not going to make it. And then Fozzie hits a wall, and then the tote board resets to like $99,000. They were like at $9 million and something. It resets to $99,000, and they're like, "Oh well, we weren't going to make it anyway. I feel better now." How do they know what the right number was at that point? Like, couldn't that be the wrong number?
Uh, yeah, I do not know.
But in typical Muppet fashion, they lose. Like, I feel like they could have made it and won, and I would have been okay with that ending. Like that they win it and everything goes okay, but what they end up finding out is like that they lose, but then, because they all came together, they really won, and then they do a big musical number. I don't love this ending.
The ending is where this movie fails. Sadly, if you think back to the Muppet movie, which go check out Rob and I's review, it has one of the most fantastical endings in any film. They're on the Western plain, and Kermit comes out with the hat and the boots, and he gives this whole spiel on how everything was worth it because he brought everyone together, and they do the big finale where the Rainbow Connection finale. And you feel fulfilled by the end of the film. You know all of these Muppets love each other and they did exactly what they were trying to do. This one, it's just, I think it's pretty dry. I didn't like, I felt way more magical going into this film than I do leaving it almost.
Yeah, no, I agree. So yeah, I wish that the ending had been different, and that's really weird for me to say about a Muppet movie. But it just felt like you missed the mark, and then you all came out into the street, and then you sang, and you're like, oh well, it's whatever. That's where I wish this movie had been better if it had had a better ending. Um, so then 3 years later, they do another movie called The Muppets Most Wanted, and then that one's really not a sequel, but it is a sequel because it's still got Walter in it. They're all still together, but it's really kind of a spy movie. It's got Ricky Gervais as the lead. Um, I don't know. Do you think there's ever a day where you and I will review this movie, or do we need to?
No.
No.
I won't watch this again. I love Tina Fey too, and Tina Fey in this is just almost hard to watch. It's just so like it's just cheaply done, I think, and it doesn't have the Muppets' best intention at heart.
Well, and the whole bit is that there's an evil Kermit and
Yeah,
yeah
like
and
that doesn't
Constantine.
exist.
I feel like there was more tie-in with this movie into the parks, etc., than there was into the first movie. The first one kind of was like, "Hey, we just did this new movie. Here it is. Jason Segel's in it. You might want to watch it." And I loved it. The other one, they were like, and same director. They were like, "Hey, you want to come back and watch this movie because you liked the first one." I mean, the posters are very similar in style. They really, it looks like they wanted to tie them together, but it's not necessary. It doesn't really continue the original story. And then, but they had
They
like
like
Constantine, like a little bit in Muppets, in Muppet Vision 3D. They had a video where Constantine takes over. They had a Constantine hunt in Epcot. Like it was a thing.
Yeah, and like I did not like Constantine. I don't like thinking of Kermit in any like I don't want an evil Kermit. I don't know if people wanted him or I don't
Yeah.
know. And at the end of that film, the one thing I remember is they did like a riff on Together Again from Muppets Take Manhattan. At the end, they're all like hanging up on this wall at the end, singing Together Again. And I was just like, turn this off. Like, this is so tough. But I do think the Muppet movie 2011 was a great comeback into the theaters for Muppets. We hadn't seen the Muppets in theaters in so long, probably since Christmas Carol. Um, but it's like it leaves the Muppets in a good limelight. I can't believe this film was over 10 years ago. Like that is hard to believe. But great soundtrack, great appearances. The Muppets are fun and friendly. The ending, I agree with you, could have been just a little bit more oomph to it, but
Yeah. There was a rumor before that Muppets Now show disaster hit Disney Plus that there was a show in development from Adam Horowitz and Eddie Kitnes who did Once Upon a Time and Tron Legacy and some other really cool things that I like. And they were going to do a Muppet show for Disney Plus, and Josh Gad was attached to it, and it apparently they decided to not do it. I'm like, this is the biggest Muppet project I ever saw happen that I wanted in my life that didn't happen. I
yeah.
don't know if you remember reading about this or not. Here's a
Yeah, vaguely. I mean, I don't get too excited about these Muppet releases anymore. Like I said, don't kill me, guys. I'm still very excited to see the Muppets I love, but like the new Disney Plus show says enough. Like it's hard to continue to get excited about these things coming out.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
but
and this one it said it was called Muppets Live Another Day, and that that Disney has since scrapped the limited series. I mean, this could have been big to me because you had some again, just like the Jason Segel thing from 2011. He was kind of riding high off the How I Met Your Mother thing. He had forgetting Sarah Marshall. He was kind of a big deal at the time. Him being attached to that was big. This was these great producers with Adam Horowitz and Eddie Kitnes Kitsis when they were working with Josh Gad. I was thinking this is perfect. Why did you take this away from me? So that would have been neat to see. But now we've got this other show coming up, which I think is super smart. The Muppets Mayhem. That's coming to Disney Plus. I love this approach. It's not this rebooted again. It's a different take on it. We don't have to go find Piggy and Kermit and where are they and meet them and all that kind of stuff. But we can. But it's about the Mayhem Band getting together to do their first album, and they've got like Taj Mowry plays this like super fan, and I'm excited for this show because again, it's different. It's like I don't have high expectations, but I'm looking forward to it.
yeah, I did see like them on stage for 5 seconds at D23. I missed the whole performance from the Electric Mayhem, but hopefully something good.
Yeah. Okay. So again, thank you guys for being with us, for watching. Please make sure to subscribe to this channel. Give us a thumbs up, especially because Katy took time out of her busy life to come and hang out with us. So thank you, Katy, for doing that. And don't forget, we have Disney Entertainment News today on this channel. Catch the last episode of that we posted, and also go back and look at some of our Muppet reviews. Like I said, we did Muppets Christmas Carol. Jill and I did early on in this, and then Katy and I did the original Muppet movie. So go back, check it out. And I don't know what Muppet thing we're going to do next, because again, you've already kind of said you're not going to do Muppets Most Wanted. So maybe we do Treasure Island, or I wish Muppets from Space was on here. I wish that Muppets Take Manhattan was on here, but those are owned, I think, by different companies, so we were not going to see that. But maybe at Christmas we come back and do a Muppets Christmas Letters to Santa. I'd be interested in getting your take
Yeah.
on that one. So,
Yeah,
so
I'd love to.
with all that said, we've gone over the music, the cast, the reboot situation here. All of that said, I need to ask you, Katy. They need to know: would you recommend this movie?
If you are a Muppets fan or you have kids who aren't familiar with the Muppets, I think this is a perfect modern gateway into Henson. Um, there's a lot of memorable moments, a lot of good music. Would I recommend this as your first Muppet watch? No. If you're someone who's like indebted in not watching anything past 2000, yes. But this would not be the first Muppet movie I would recommend to you. I think it's a fun take on where they're at now, but there's my
Okay,
answer.
all right. For me, I would say I would definitely recommend it because it's one of my favorites, because it has a great flow. I think if you go back and you look at some of the old Muppet movies, they get a little slow, or the guest star thing too. By this time, if you watch it and you're watching it with your kids, there may be some references they get because of Jack Black, because of Neil Patrick Harris, and people they've seen before. But if you go back to some of the originals, some of the cameos I don't even get. I'm like, I'm missing them left and right when we were talking about Great Muppet Caper, because it's just like these are people who were huge at the time or had just been huge. So I think that the references are more modern. I do think it's a good one for the family to watch. I don't think you have to have too much in the Muppet lore, but I do agree with you that, like, if you really want to like just dive into the Muppets, you need to start with the original Muppet movie. But with this one, it's a really good companion. And if this was the only Muppet movie you're going to watch with your kids, I think this would be a good one to watch. I would definitely make sure you know that you're watching the Muppets, the movie, and not the Muppets, the ABC show, because they're very different
Yeah.
pieces of content. So awesome. Well, thanks so much, Katy. I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you again real soon. Thank you guys so much. Again,
Yes. Thanks, Rob.
uh, have a great week, and we will see you next time.